Okay, recording.
Okay, so yeah, we are reviewing this paper called State of the Art Human-Computer Action in Metaverse by Zhihan Lyu. Yeah, I mean, overall, it feels like it's a collection of like 100 different papers in HCI stitched together to like in sort of this narrative about the future of the metaverse. That seems like it's kind of like aligned with like the Matrix or something, like sort of this future of simulation technology. Yeah, feeling like it's relevant to us because in the way that it can act as a directory to different types of papers in this space, and more specifically, it discusses voice, how voice can be used to better understand the user wants. So what did you think of it?
Yeah, when I think of the metaverse, I always think of course, like Mark Zuckerberg first, and seeing his like avatar in that space and looking super like janky and corny. And I realized that, why is it not a reality? Why do we not have it now? I thought it was because of like software customer adoption. Like they didn't build it out yet, or people don't want it. But reading this paper made me realize that there's a lot of technology that they were waiting on, or that's still being developed in order for it to be like realized. And so that's 5G, blockchain. To me, those are like things that I didn't even consider, but are blocking the further development and adoption of metaverse. But I think it's interesting for our use case in terms of thinking about HCI and how people will interact in the metaverse, and how can we think of it as a matrix where you're just yourself fully interacting with the environments, as if you're just the person in the real world. So how can we like extract some of those natural seamless interactions and bring it to the real world now for work streams, for personal life?
Yeah, I think it's well, one, I think it was like like the paper basically is very adamant in saying like the metaverse is the future. But I guess from what you were saying, it's like, whether or not we believe that that's what it is, so how do we, I think we are more interested in, okay, well, how can some of this be used in like the physical world? And what's relevant today? And so I guess what do we find was like the most relevant thing?
Yeah, I think when we were discussing before, we were highlighting speech as a modality that's maybe natural and would be used in the metaverse, but also, of course, used in the physical world. So how can we modify or adapt technology to make it understand us now, to do work based on our current speech patterns?
What comes to mind to you?
Yeah, I think if you think about speech, right, and technology, I think of first like conversational agents, Alexa, Siri, and how they are kind of always present. Siri's always on my phone. I always have my phone with me. Alexa's all around my house when I worked at Alexa, so I could speak without having to have my device nearby or opening anything. But the commands to get it to do anything I wanted was very rigid. I had to say it a certain way, speak a certain volume, say it slowly, and if it didn't do that, it would not understand me, and I'd just get frustrated really fast. After one false or bad interaction, I would like no longer want to do it again. And so to me, it's like, how can we use voice interactions that are useful because they are fast, they're accessible, but how can we not force the user into this rigid form of speech to do work?
And just for additional context, Edison worked on Amazon Alexa. What were some of the things that you had to do to test during that time?
Yeah, I worked on the computer vision team for a while, also a little bit on the audio side. Testing required, loading our code onto 6 different devices and testing it. these series of tests twice a week to make sure that the releases were flawless. Very
Didn't you have like a bunch of devices in your home?
Yeah, so I had like maybe 3 on my desk.
Yeah.
If I was testing a release, I'd have to like get one out of my closet. It was like this huge TV-sized one.
Yeah.
Plug it in, and yeah, it was cool that we're like working on hardware,
Yeah.
but very manual.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess we're thinking. I guess to follow up what we were talking about, like the sort of what are the work interactions? Well, what are the applications?
Right.
And we're thinking about maybe something in the space of work. You know, whether that's, I mean, the paper itself references sort of this cultural game that kids use in the house. But we're trying to think about sort of how to improve workflows. Whether that be something that exists in the background in your meetings, your Slack channel, sort of with the purpose of aggregating tasks, making sure people are followed up with on their tasks. Potentially that's a use case that can leverage some of these technologies today.
Yeah, you've always been interested in this idea of like invisible technology, so that we can be more present in the physical world. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I guess there's this maybe dual-edged sword where on one end, sort of omnipresent technology is like could be seen as like, oh, is stealing your data or like always listening to you. But I think when used well, it's like what are things that are automatically done for us that we want? You know, how can that be used not to just like manipulate us into like buying things, but like, okay, hey, by the way, I noticed that you mentioned last week to Johnny at work that you were going to get this done. It doesn't seem like you got it done yet. Just a like soft reminder, and you're like, oh, that's actually really useful. So in terms of invisible for me, it's like more tied to like, does it help me reduce my cognitive load? Is it surprising me in a good way? And I'm happy that it's like listening to me. So like, what are those use cases? And yeah, I mean, I think it seems like the technology is here today that can make that come to life in a more realistic way.
Yeah, I imagine that you mentioned a use case of like task management at work. That to me, almost everyone has that problem, and missing a task could be huge. There's like could be a large like monetizable amount tied to that missed action.
It's a good one.
Yeah. And just, I mean, I feel like everyone kind of resonates with this feeling of like, I have so much shit to do.
Yeah.
And like, not only do I have shit to do, but I have to like organize the shit that I have to do.
Yeah.
Which is work itself. Like, and so it's like, can you reduce that in any way, just to make work more pleasant?
Yeah.
But
Hey, that's you.
I guess historically that's been solved by like having an assistant, secretary kind of work. And people have tried to have virtual assistants. There's a bunch of technologies that maybe try to solve that problem. Have like Alexa, Siri, like they're called virtual assistants, but they don't really do those tasks that you're describing. What do you think is lacking? Like, what's the jump that needs to be done?
I think it's the framing. I mean, if I remember my experiences with Siri, it's like about like what I expected and then the output. And so I think with a lot, even with like sort of ChatGPT and phrasing it as like as AI, it's like if I expect it to be at a certain level and I test it there and it doesn't match that expectation, to me it fails and it makes me less likely to use it again. So in a way, and we talked about this earlier, it's like we're reducing the scope so that we know it's going to be able to do a good job at that thing and not overpromise like it's just like an assistant.
Thank you.
No, it's a computer that can maybe do smarter things. than a computer can do before.
Right.
So finding that sweet spot of like, okay, this is a new skill or ability that we didn't have access to before, and being very consistent of like delivering that without over-promising like AI or this human.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that. So
But then
choosing a narrow focus but doing it really well.
Yeah.
And that will also set expectations for the user that this isn't doing everything, this is just doing this one thing.
The thing
Right.
is,
And you can expect to do this one thing reliably. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think with this whole AI thing, it's the generative AI thing. It's like there's like this randomness of like, okay,
The thing is that I
it can
always
do
come up with you with
maybe do all of these different things, and then our old way of computing is like very instructive. Like I tell you to do this exact thing. So like, what's the right balance between introducing that randomness, but also having like control where you can trust sort of what it's doing, the output.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I mean, this was our first sort of research paper that we read together. Yeah, I mean, it was a little shaky because it was like kind of hard to read at first, but I think we'll do more of these.
Yeah, it was fun. Learned a lot, and
The official.
yeah, even though maybe everything I learned is not related to
And then she shall be the,
interface or
the official, like the
you know HCI, I think it's still just good to push my bounds of like learning and explore technology.
Cool. All right.
We pay.
Thanks, Justin.
We own